people have been arrested for the kidnapping of an 11-year-old girl in November. The Crime Intelligence Kidnapping Task Team, supported by the Joburg Flying Squad, rescued the child in Soweto yesterday. She was held captive for 48 days after being snatched by gunmen outside her primary school in Mayfair. Our reporter Bateman is following that story for us, and he joins us for more conversation on this. Barry, remind us again of the operation which led to the girl being rescued initially.
Yeah, good afternoon. So it was quite an operation early hours of yesterday morning. You had this crime intelligence kidnapping task team, which was supported by the Johannesburg Flying Squad. Now, through their investigations, they'd been led to an address in Devlin, which was like a little commune. It had a main house in the middle of the property, and surrounding it in an L shape were these various other rooms which people would be renting out. Well, the police raided the property. They were kicking down doors. They kicked down several of the doors on the property. Eventually, when they arrived at the room where they found the 11-year-old girl, she was alone in the room at the time. We understand that she told investigators that the two men who were looking after her had fled shortly before the operation had commenced. So no arrests on the scene. We understand that the girl physically was unharmed, which is certainly much of a relief. However, having spoken to her father yesterday, they welcome the outpouring of support from the public, but making the point that they're still too traumatized to speak at this stage. So certainly a great success for this newly established anti-kidnapping task team. It was established late last year in response to that very high-profile Moti matter. I'm sure you'll recall that one, where, you know, having looked at how that had played itself out, that there was not enough resources being assigned to this specific crime. So at least now we're seeing some solid results from the efforts of this team.
Well, speaking about results, the police have now confirmed that indeed the suspects have been arrested, but they were not arrested at the actual scene as well. What are the details around that?
Yeah, quite right, Faith. And, you know, it gives you an idea of how this investigation was unfolding in the background. A lot of it kept under wraps and not revealed. Of course, things are very sensitive as you go through this. First prize was always going to be rescuing that 11-year-old girl. So what we hear from the police now, that is on the 7th of December, 2 suspects were arrested. They had been linked to the kidnapping of this child. They had already appeared in court. What we understand is that, and I've spoken to sources close to this investigation, that it was that arrest of those 2 individuals which led them to a 3rd suspect. That suspect was picked up having crossed over into Mozambique. The person was arrested there on the 31st of December. So New Year's Eve, he spent a night, the first night in jail, actually. But extradition proceedings are currently underway in that country to bring that suspect back to South Africa to face justice. But what we understand about this individual as well is that he's supposed to be the ringleader or the mastermind. And as we know, in many cases like this, they often run like a racket, and their individuals often be involved in several other such types of cases. So I think a significant breakthrough with that arrest of the individual. But the big focus now is to get him back to this country, to get him in court.
Yeah, Barry, before I let you go, I mean, right now what we're seeing, and you've been tracking this developing story quite extensively, even throughout 2021, is that kidnappings are on the rise in this country, particularly when it comes to children. Is it all just for ransom, or is there a bigger issue here at play that we are not aware of? Just trying to understand exactly why are we seeing just such a spike in the number of kidnappings in the country?
Well, you know, speaking to the experts, hostage negotiators, former police officers and people who are, you know, deal with this almost every day on the frontline basis, kidnappings are a significant problem in the country. However, the most common form of kidnapping that is registered, and these are in the police stats, primarily relate to hijacking and robberies and the like. Only a small fraction of the total number of kidnappings that we see in South Africa are in fact for ransom. That said, kidnappings for ransom have been on the increase over the last couple of years. I think there's been a significant increase over the last decade. And what we're seeing here, again, this is speaking to the experts, what they explain is that the rise in these types of crime is a symptom of general lawlessness. So the breakdown of law and order, where you have rampant corruption within the authorities, so that when you commit crimes like this, you can certainly get away with them, where you might have corrupt individuals within the organizations that would investigate such crimes. Just last month, we had a senior person who was involved, before we had the anti-kidnapping task team established, a senior member in the SAPS who was linked to a unit which investigated kidnapping, was suspended after being accused of trying to solicit bribes from a family whose loved one had been kidnapped. So that kind of corruption certainly undermines the crimes, but it emboldens the criminals to continue executing these crimes. And it's all about reward as well. If you know that there's minimum risk and the reward is high, well, then you're going to see more of these crimes committing. And sadly, with the decline of law enforcement in South Africa, as you see other crimes that have increased over the years, kidnapping is one of those that has also just gotten worse.
We'll leave it there. Barry Bateman, our reporter, they're giving us the latest in terms of that story. Good news, I think parents can breathe a sigh of relief after the return of that 11-year-old girl. And